Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into the real details of modern dental fillings.
Yeah, those tooth-colored ones, composite resins and adhesives.
Exactly. We're moving beyond the old silver amalgam look and exploring the actual science, how these things really work and stick.
Right. And we got some great source material, video clips, PDF details, all focused on these composites and how they bond.
So the mission today?
To really unpack the magic behind them. How do they bond so well? And why are they such a big step up from older materials like amalgam?
And we know you, our listeners, want to get up to speed quickly, maybe have those aha moments without getting lost in, super technical jargon.
We'll definitely try to keep it engaging and clear.
Okay, so first things first. Why the big shift away from amalgam? What were the main drivers there?
Well, amalgam was, and still is in some places, a real workhorse, very durable. But aesthetically, not so much. Patients weren't fans of that dark silver look.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And clinically, there were other concerns, too. Things like microleakage, tiny gaps forming between the filling and the tooth. Plus, the potential for causing tiny cracks in the tooth itself, and sometimes sensitivity to hot and cold temperatures. So dentists started looking for better options.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, resin seems like the obvious aesthetic choice, but the early ones weren't perfect either, were they? I remember the video mentioning strength issues and bonding problems.
Absolutely. That really brings us to the core challenge, the sort of central puzzle here.
Which is?
How do you replace natural tooth structure, which is mostly this inorganic stuff, hydroxyapatite, with a synthetic resin? And not just replace it, but get a bond that's strong, durable, lasts for years, and is, safe for the body.
Right. It's definitely not just like swapping out a Lego brick.
Not at all.
It's complex.
So what makes it work? Our sources mention 4 key things for the bonding part.
Yes, exactly. Both sources highlight these. First, surface energy and wetting. That's crucial.
Then, interpenetration. Think of it as mixing together at a microscopic level, forming what's called a hybrid zone.
Hybrid zone. Got it.
Third is micromechanical interlocking, basically, the adhesive flowing into tiny nooks and crannies. And finally, actual chemical bonding between the materials.
And you said wetting is the most critical first step.
Yeah, the video really stressed that. If the adhesive doesn't wet the surface properly, none of the other stuff can happen effectively.
Surface energy, wetting.
Yeah.
Okay, break that down for us. Make it relatable.
Okay, think about waxing your car. Water beads up, right? That surface has low energy. It repels the water.
Right.
Now think of clean glass. Water spreads right out. High surface energy. We want the tooth surface to be more like that clean glass for the adhesive.
So the adhesive spreads out thin and gets into close contact.
Exactly. We measure this with the contact angle. A low angle means good wetting, good spreading. High angle, like the water bead, means poor wetting.
Okay, makes sense. So how do dentists make the tooth surface have higher energy?
Well, the sources point to having a clean surface, obviously, but also making it slightly rough on a micro level.
Yeah.
And that's where the acid etch technique comes in. It's a real game changer.
Acid etching sounds a bit aggressive. What's involved?
It sounds intense, but it's very controlled. Usually it's phosphoric acid, maybe around 37% concentration.
Okay.
Its first job is to clean off something called the smear layer. That's just microscopic debris left from preparing the tooth.
Like dust after drilling.
Sort of, yeah. A mix of tooth dust and organic bits. Once that's gone, the acid creates these tiny, tiny pores on the enamel surface.
Micro roughness.
Exactly. The video described it as exposing enamel prisms, making it look like a honeycomb under a microscope. This massively increases the surface area and the surface energy.
So much better for wetting and gripping. And usually they etch enamel and the layer underneath the dentin at the same time?
Yes, simultaneous etching is common, and typically it's only for about 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
Usually. Though the PDF notes it might be a bit longer if the tooth has high fluoride content or for baby teeth, because their enamel's a bit different.
And then rinsing is super important.
Oh, absolutely critical. Rinse thoroughly with water, maybe 20 seconds or so, to get rid of all that acid.
Okay, etched, rinsed, now drying. But this is where it gets tricky, right? Drying enamel versus dentin is different.
Very different. This is a key point. Etched enamel. You want it bone dry. It should look chunky, white, frosted. That's perfect for the hydrophobic resins, the ones that don't like water.
Okay.
But dentin is different. It's got more organic stuff, collagen, and it has tiny fluid-filled tunnels.
Right. The video mentioned if you dry dentin too much, The collagen network exposed by the acid just collapses.
Exactly. Flattens down like a deflated sponge, and it forms this sort of impermeable layer. The resin just can't get in properly.
And that means a weak bond or no bond.
Pretty much bond failure. You absolutely need that resin to penetrate the demineralized collagen network. That infiltration is what creates the hybrid layer.
Ah, the hybrid layer again? So that's the resin mixed into the dentin collagen.
Precisely. It's a mix of tooth structure and adhesive, and it's incredibly important for a strong, durable bond in dentin. It provides micromechanical locking.
So, okay. We cat over dry dentin, but the bonding resin itself is hydrophobic. It hates water. How on earth do you bridge that gap? The video talked about something with two sides.
Spot on. That's where the primer comes in. It's the essential step for dentin bonding.
The primer, okay, what's its job?
Its main job is to keep that collagen network hydrated and fluffed up, but also chase away the excess surface water. Primers contain special molecules, monomers, that have one end that loves water hydrophilic.
Okay.
And they're dissolved in solvents like acetone or ethanol, which help carry them in and also help displace the water.
So the water-loving end sticks to the moist dentin, keeps the collagen open.
Exactly. It makes the dentin surface receptive, even though it's moist. The primer basically acts as an intermediary, getting the surface ready for the water-hating bonding resin that comes next.
And HEMA was mentioned, hydroxyethyl methacrylate.
Yes, HEMA is a very common primer ingredient. It's quite hydrophilic and also acts a bit like a solvent itself. And importantly, you usually just gently air dry the primer. You don't rinse it off or like cure it at this stage.
Air dry, not cure.
Yeah.
Got it. So primer's on. Next is the bonding resin itself.
Yes, the bonding resin or adhesive. This is typically a low viscosity, solvent-free resin, and it is mostly hydrophobic.
So it likes the primer layer now.
It bonds well to the primer on the dentin side and directly to the etched dry enamel. Its other end, also hydrophobic, is designed to chemically bond or copolymerize with the actual composite filling material you place on top.
Okay, so it links the tooth primer to the filling.
Right, and it helps ensure the primer layer fully hardens, strengthens the whole adhesive zone, including that hybrid layer, and it seals the interface against fluid leakage.
What are these bonding resins made of?
Mostly those hydrophobic dimethacrylates we'll talk about later, like bis-GMA, TED-GMA, UDMA. But as the PDF mentions, they usually contain a small amount of a hydrophilic monomer too, like HEMA, just to help them initially interact with the primed, slightly moist dentin surface.
And is there a target for how strong this bond should be? A number?
Well, there's no single universal standard, but the PDF suggests aiming for a bond strength of 20 megapascals, 20 MPa or higher. That's generally seen as a good goal for a reliable, long-lasting bond under chewing forces.
20 MPa. Okay, so that covers sticking the filling to the tooth, etching, priming, bonding. Now let's dig into the actual filling material, the composite itself, three main parts, right?
Yes, three key ingredients make up a dental composite. First, you have the polymer matrix. Think of it as the glue or the binder holding everything together.
Made of?
It's usually based on monomers like bis-GMA or similar ones like UDMA, TED-GMA, HDNF. These are dimethacrylates. When they polymerize or harden, they form a highly cross-linked network.
Cross-linked meaning strong and stable.
Exactly, like a 3D scaffold. Very durable. But these base monomers, like bis-GMA and UDMA, are incredibly viscous on their own. The video compared them to cold honey.
Huh. Yeah, hard to work with.
Very. So to make the composite handleable, they add diluting monomers, like TED-GMA, which are much runnier.
Makes sense. But there's a catch.
There is. The more diluent monomer you add, the more the material tends to shrink when it hardens. That's polymerization shrinkage. And too much shrinkage can pull the filling away from the tooth, creating gaps. So it's a balancing act.
Okay, matrix is the binder. What's the second component? Fillers.
Yes, reinforcing filler particles. These are tiny particles of things like glass, silica, quartz, or sometimes even pre-polymerized resin bits.
Lots of different types.
Oh yeah. The PDF lists silica, borosilicate glass, fused quartz, various silicates, even glasses with heavy elements like barium, strontium, zirconium, or zinc. Those help with X-ray visibility.
And there's a lot of filler in there, right? Like 50, 80% by weight.
Easily. Sometimes 30, 70% by volume, which is a huge proportion. These fillers are critical.
Why? What do they actually do?
Several really important things. First, reinforcement. They make the composite much stronger, stiffer, tougher, able to withstand chewing forces.
Okay, strength.
What else? They significantly reduce that polymerization shrinkage we just talked about. The fillers themselves don't shrink, so the more filler you have, the less overall shrinkage of the composite.
Ah, that's clever.
They also reduce thermal expansion and contraction. Fillers don't change size much with temperature changes compared to the resin matrix, so a high filler load makes the composite expand and contract more like a natural tooth, reducing stress at the filling margin when you eat hot or cold foods.
Less stress, longer lasting filling. Makes sense. Anything else?
Yep. Fillers control the handling, the viscosity. Adding more filler makes it thicker, more like a paste, easier to sculpt. Less filler makes it more flowy.
Right.
They also decrease water absorption, the tendency to absorb water over time, which can degrade the material. More filler means less resin matrix to absorb water. And finally, as I mentioned, specific fillers make the composite radiopaque visible on X-rays. Using fillers with heavy atoms like barium or strontium allows dentists to see the filling and check its integrity later on. Ideally, it matches enamel's radiopacity.
Wow, fillers do a lot. So the type and size of filler must really matter then. That leads to different classifications of composite.
Absolutely. The filler particle size is a major way we categorize composites. First, you had the older macro-filled, but now we talk about small or fine particle composites, sometimes called mini or midi-filled. Their particles are maybe 0.1 to 10 micrometers.
And their properties?
Decent strength, reasonably polishable, but maybe not to a super high gloss. Good all-rounders, especially for front.
The microfilled. Sounds even smaller.
Much smaller. Tiny silica particles like 0.01 to 0.1 micrometers, but they're often clumped together in larger resin particles first. Microfills have a lot more resin matrix, maybe 40–80%. Means they tend to absorb more water, expand more with heat, and they're not as strong or stiff. But they polish beautifully. Super smooth finish. So great for low-stress areas where looks are paramount, like Class 3 or V fillings on smooth surfaces. Not ideal for back teeth or biting edges.
Okay. And hybrids, a mix.
Exactly. Hybrids blend those microfine particles with the larger fine particles. The goal is to get better polishability than the small fine particle types, but better strength than the microfills.
So best of both worlds.
Kind of. They're very versatile. Good for many front tooth restorations, including biting edges, Class 4, and maybe small fillings on back teeth that aren't taking direct chewing force. They became really popular.
And the latest evolution? Nanocomposites?
Yes, or nanohybrids. These use nanoparticles just 1 to 100 nanometers in size, really tiny. Because they're so small and often specially treated, you can pack a lot of them in, over 60% by volume, sometimes near 80% by weight.
Wow, and the benefit?
You get the amazing polishability and optical properties, like translucency, similar to microfills, but with mechanical strength that's good enough for posterior stress-bearing restorations. Often, they're nanohybrids, mixing nanoparticles with slightly larger particles. Very advanced stuff.
Incredible how particle size makes such a difference. Now, what about handling? Composites are also classified by how they, well, feel and flow.
Right. You have flowable composites and packable composites.
Flowables first, lower filler.
Yep. They're usually modified hybrids or small particle types with less filler added. This makes them much less viscous, runnier. They flow easily.
Good for milling.
Excellent for lining the cavity floor, especially in tricky areas like between back teeth, Class 2 boxes. They adapt really well to irregular shapes, kind of like a sealant layer.
But not strong enough for the main filling?
Generally, no. Lower filler means lower strength, less wear resistance. So you typically use them as a liner or base, then cover them with a stronger, more filled composite for the bulk of the restoration, especially on chewing surfaces.
Okay, like a foundation. And packable composites.
These are the opposite. Very high filler loading. Makes them much stiffer, thicker, more putty-like or paste-like.
Why would you want that?
Some dentists like that. They feel a bit more like amalgam when you're packing or condensing them into the cavity. They offer good strength because of the high filler content.
Any downsides?
They can be harder to adapt perfectly to the cavity walls and harder to sculpt, especially on vertical surfaces. They might require a bit more finesse, perhaps.
Interesting trade-offs. Okay, we have the material, we know how to stick it. How do we actually make it hard? The activation methods.
Two main ways to kick off that polymerization, that hardening reaction. Chemical curing or light curing.
Chemical cure first. That's the two-paste system.
Correct. You get two pastes. One has an initiator, usually benzoyl peroxide. The other has an activator, a man. When you mix them, they react, form free radicals, and boom, polymerization starts.
Sounds simple enough. Drawbacks. The video mentioned some.
Yeah, a few. Mixing incorporates air bubbles, which create porosity, weak spots.
Yeah.
Oxygen from the air can also inhibit the curing right at the surface, leaving a sticky layer.
Okay.
And the biggest one may be you have no control over working time. Once you mix, it starts setting. You have to place it and shape it fast.
Tricky for complex fillings? Any advantages?
Well, It's useful for very large fillings, like core buildups after root canals, where getting a curing light to penetrate deeply and evenly might be difficult. It cures throughout the bulk.
Okay. So the alternative is light curing, the single paste stuff.
Exactly. Much more common now for direct fillings. It's a single paste that contains a photosensitizer, usually camproquinone or CQ,
CQ?
and an amine initiator. CQ absorbs blue light, typically around 468 nanometers. When you shine the specific blue light on it, the CQ gets energized, reacts with the amine, generates free radicals, and the polymerization happens.
And the big win here is control.
Total control over working time. You place the composite, sculpt it, get it perfect, and you hit it with the light to harden it. No rush.
How long do you cure for?
It depends on the material and the light, but the PDF mentioned around 40 seconds for a typical 2mm layer is common. Light cure is also generally less prone to that oxygen inhibition issue on the surface.
Sounds much better. Any downsides to light cure?
Well, the light only penetrates so deep. So for fillings thicker than about 2 or 3 millimeters, you have to place the composite in increments, in layers, curing each layer before adding the next.
Layering. That can take time for big fillings.
It can, yes. And you need the curing light unit itself, which is an expense, plus eye protection is essential for everyone.
And how you use the light matters too, doesn't it? Distance, angle?
Oh, hugely important. Critical for success. You need the right wavelength of light for the specific composite, usually 480 millimeter for CQ. The light tip needs to be super close to the resin, almost touching and perpendicular to the surface.
And steady.
Rock steady for the full time. And dentists need to regularly check the output, the intensity of their curing light to make sure it's delivering enough energy. Not enough energy means incomplete curing, weak filling, lots of different light types too, LED, halogen, plasma arc, lasers.
Wow. Okay, so placing a simple white filling involves, well, quite a lot of steps and details.
It really does. That's why the video rightly called composite placement technique sensitive, maybe even more so than amalgam in some ways, because every step, etching, priming, bonding, layering, curing, has to be done just right.
It definitely sounds like it. Okay, this has been a fantastic deep dive. Let's try and quickly summarize the really key points.
Sure. We saw the move from amalgam, driven by aesthetics and some clinical concerns. Then the core of it, bonding to tooth structure. That involves meticulous surface prep, the acid etch.
Right, creating micro roughness.
Exactly. Then the different needs for enamel, dry versus dentin, moist. That critical priming step for dentin to manage moisture and allow bonding.
Using those two-sided primer molecules?
Yep. Followed by the adhesive resin itself, linking the tooth to the composite. Then we looked inside the composite, the resin matrix binder, and crucially, the fillers.
And how those fillers are key for strength, reducing shrinkage, controlling handling, and even X-ray visibility.
And how filler size dictates the type, microfill, hybrid, nanofill, and where they work best.
Plus the handling types, flowable versus packable.
And finally, how we make it all hard, either chemically with two pastes or more commonly now with the blue light cure, remembering the importance of technique like layering and proper light use.
So these composites really tackle the old limitations, offering great looks, direct bonding, and good longevity, if done correctly.
That's the key takeaway. Technique matters immensely. It's a precise multi-step process.
Absolutely. So looking ahead with all this progress, what kind of future innovations might we see? Building on these principles we've talked about, it makes you wonder about the next generation even stronger, maybe even bioactive, easier to use materials.
It's an exciting field, constantly evolving, definitely food for thought.
It is indeed. And for listeners intrigued by dental materials,
our next deep dive will actually explore dental cements, bases, and liners. More materials, different jobs, but building on some of these same ideas about adhesion and properties.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.